The next to the last time I'd been in Russia, I think, I had an interesting experience I want to relate to you. We'd had a successful campaign in, let's see, it was, no, that's Kharkov, I can't remember, in Leningrad, it was Volgograd, okay? It was named after, it used to be called Leningrad, and they changed it to Volgograd now. By the way, that battle was I was reading that particular war where Germany tried to take Stalingrad, it lasted for over 100 days. More people were killed in that one battle than in the history of all battles in the world. 2 million people died. About 1 million Russians, 1 million Germans. That's just one battle. And of course, the Russians finally held off, and that was a horrible experience. The evangelist I worked with, Vadim Butov, his grandfather was a turret gunner in that battle, and he showed me some of the places where the battle was taking place. Well, after leaving the meetings, I spent some time in Moscow. I always enjoyed going there. I had some friends there, and I like to go to the Kremlin and just look and just walk around and see different places. So after I had 2 days, after I had a translator, a girl who helped take me around and show me. After the day was over, I went back to the division headquarters, which was on the outskirts of there, and you have to take a subway to get back, because it's quite a ways away. When I got home, I said I have one more day, then I'm going to be heading back home. So I said, I'm going to check my luggage, make sure everything is in place. I had a few souvenirs and so on. And I checked, okay, I said, so I've got this, I've got that, I've got that. Now let's see, I've got my passport. Let's see, where did I put my passport? Yeah, it's got to be here. So I checked around, I checked in my violin case. No. I said, am I absent-minded? Did I stick it under the pillow? So I looked under the bed, I looked under the mattress, I looked everywhere. And then you begin to panic, because you can't get out of the country without a visa and a passport. Then you start to look in places you know you didn't put it. Like in the refrigerator and the freezer, I looked in that. Did I actually accidentally put it? No, it wasn't there. And then it suddenly dawned on me. Either I lost it or it was stolen. And the first impulse is to panic. What am I going to do? But I had been enough times to Russia, and I'd seen how the Lord worked in a great way. I didn't feel that at all. I felt like somewhat peaceful. I said, I prayed that night. I said, Lord, I've lost the only thing that can get me back home again. You know, otherwise for a long, long delay to get a passport and a visa can take weeks or months, I don't know. So the next morning, I went down, I talked to some of the other, there were a couple people who were there from the United States. Brenda Walsh, I don't know, you know her, 3ABN. She was there, and her sister and her husband, I think, was there. So we formed a circle, and we had prayer that God would work something out for me to get back home again, because I had a big family reunion coming up a day or so after I was going to get back. I didn't want to be the only one to miss it. So I took my translator, we went down, I said, I want to go down to the American Embassy, see what I can do. So we took the subway, and we took a bus, and then we took a taxi, and finally arrived at the U.S. Embassy. And by the time we got there, it was 1 o'clock, and they closed at 2 in the afternoon. So I got in there, I was waiting in line. Finally it was my turn. I went up, and I had a photocopy of my passport, just a single sheet. And I handed it to him. I said, I've lost my passport. I said, how soon could I get another one? And he said, well, he said, it would cost you $160, but you need to have a visa. And you can't get that for days, maybe weeks, to get a Russian exit visa. to leave the country. He said, there's no way. So I was standing in line and I was praying, Lord, please work something out. And the guy said, do you want to get another passport or not? And I just stood there. And then all of a sudden, another gentleman came up to the guy behind the desk. And he handed him, I remember it was a yellow piece of scratch paper. And he handed it to him. And the guy looked at it. And then he looked at the photocopy of my passport. And he said, we just got a phone call from a lady who found an American passport. And I remember the man behind me, he said, incredible, he said. And then he said, but she didn't leave her name, she didn't leave an address, and she didn't leave a phone number. And Moscow was a huge city. Now, I was fearful, Moscow was considered, or Russia was considered one of the most corrupt cities in the world. And for someone to find a passport or to steal a passport, that's a gold mine. And here, an honest person found it, but I didn't know where she was. But I felt really relieved. I said, Lord, you've answered half of my prayer. Now I have to find out where she is and where is the passport. So I decided to backtrack where I'd been the day before. We went to here, we went to there, and I said, I think there was an open air market. I said, because I bought a couple things, and I told my translator, I said, let's go back there first and see what we could find. So we took a bus, and I could hardly wait for the bus to get there. Now I got out and I ran as fast as I could. They were closing shop. They were packing their belongings and closing their little stalls. The sun was going down. And the very first place I came to, a little stall, there was a lady, and I tapped her on the shoulder. And she turned around, and as soon as she saw me, she recognized me. And she pulled out of her belt, like that, and there was my passport. Oh, I tell you, I was so happy. I gave her a big bear hug. I just about knocked her over. But I was just over it. I took my translator. We went off a little distance. I said, we thanked the Lord. I said, God, I know you've worked a miracle. What are the chances of finding that? Nil, practically. And evidently, when I was buying something, I had taken my belt off with my passport and laid it down and forgot to put it on again. So anyway, that was just one experience. It really increased my faith that God does look after his own and so on.